The ballroom was filled with laughter and clinking glasses as guests mingled beneath the soft glow of chandeliers. It was an opulent high school reunion, the type that Sarah never thought she would attend. Yet here she was, back among familiar faces that reminded her of a past she had fought hard to escape. She kept a low profile, glancing around the room at former classmates who, at least outwardly, seemed polished and successful. Her heart raced slightly as memories of her school days surfaced, the taunts, the casual cruelties, and the constant reminder of her family's financial struggles. But tonight, Sarah was determined to hold her head high. As she scanned the crowd, her gaze fell on Charles, her former classmate and one of the most popular boys in school. Charles had been the kind of person who carried an effortless charm, a confidence that seemed to border on arrogance. He'd grown into a handsome man, dressed impeccably and surrounded by a group of friends. Charles, with his family's wealth and privilege, had always walked through life as if the world existed solely to meet his desires. As Sarah tried to blend into the background, Charles caught her eye and began walking toward her with that same smug smile she remembered too well. "Sarah, wow, is that really you?" Charles greeted her, his tone laced with mock surprise. He looked her up and down with a dismissive glance. "I didn't think I'd see you at an event like this. Places like these don't usually attract." He paused, letting the implication linger. "Everyone." Sarah's face flushed as her mind raced with responses, but she simply offered a tight-lipped smile. Charles's friends laughed, clearly amused by his veiled insult. Memories of the subtle humiliation she endured in high school flooded her mind, and she had to steady her breathing to keep her composure. Charles leaned in closer, lowering his voice but ensuring only she could hear. "Tell me, Sarah, are you still struggling?" His words dripped with condescension, yet he wore the same charming smile, as though he was offering her a compliment. She felt her pulse quicken as the old, familiar feeling of shame crept up on her. But beneath that shame, a simmering determination began to build. She met his gaze, standing taller, unwilling to let his words cut as deeply as they once did. She had worked too hard to be dragged down by his petty insults. Sarah took a deep breath, refusing to let his arrogance ruin her night. She had come far since her school days, and while Charles's words stung, they reminded her of why she'd pushed herself so hard. As Charles turned back to his friends, laughing as though he had scored a victory, Sarah felt a shift within herself. Tonight was not the night for revenge, but she made a silent vow to herself. Someday, she would prove him wrong, and he would regret underestimating her. Growing up, Sarah's life had been anything but easy. Her family lived paycheck to paycheck, often struggling to cover basic needs. She'd watched her mother juggle multiple jobs just to keep food on the table, an image forever etched into Sarah's mind. From a young age, Sarah understood that life wasn't fair, and that she would have to work twice as hard as others to achieve her dreams. Yet, instead of letting bitterness consume her, she found strength in her family's resilience. Her mother's determination inspired her to push forward, and she developed a fierce dedication to succeed. By the time Sarah entered college, she was used to hardship. She worked 2 jobs to pay for her education, balancing her time between classes and shifts that lasted late into the night. While other students enjoyed their weekends, Sarah would be working, saving every penny she could. The lack of sleep and relentless schedule took its toll on her, but she refused to give up. She carried with her the hopes of her family and the belief that, somehow, she could break free from the cycle of poverty that had defined her life. In her quiet moments, Sarah sometimes wondered if all her efforts would ever be enough. College was filled with wealthy students who seemed to glide through life effortlessly, reminding her of people like Charles. But instead of letting their privilege discourage her, Sarah used it as motivation. She was determined to build a future where no one could make her feel small. She wanted more than just survival. She wanted a life filled with pride and purpose, one that no one, not even someone like Charles, could belittle. The reunion had left a bitter taste in Sarah's mouth, but it also awakened something inside her. Charles's arrogance, his smug dismissal of her, reminded her of every struggle she had endured and every dream she had clung to despite the odds. She knew she had come far since her high school days, yet she still felt the old sting of being looked down upon. But this time, instead of retreating, she resolved to rise above it. The encounter had fueled a quiet determination within her to achieve something so grand that even someone like Charles couldn't ignore it. As she walked home that night, Sarah replayed the evening's events in her mind. She recalled the satisfaction on Charles's face as he mocked her, the laughter of his friends, and the way it had made her feel like she was back in high school, powerless and insignificant. But she wasn't that girl anymore. She was stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to prove her worth. This time, she wouldn't let his words define her. She made a silent promise to herself that she would return to a future reunion, not as a guest but as someone whose success spoke louder than any insult. Sarah knew that her journey wouldn't be easy, but she was no stranger to hardship. She was prepared to face any obstacle that came her way. Charles's words, instead of breaking her, had given her a new purpose. She would rise, not for the sake of proving him wrong, but to prove to herself and to everyone who had ever doubted her that she was capable of greatness. Just weeks after the reunion, Sarah received a phone call that would change the course of her life. It was from a renowned corporation offering her a position that she could have only dreamed of. The role was prestigious, one that came with responsibilities that would challenge her in ways she had never experienced. It felt almost surreal, like the universe was acknowledging her hard work and resilience. After all the struggles, here was an opportunity to rewrite her story. Without hesitation, Sarah accepted the offer. It felt like the culmination of years of sacrifice, and she was ready to prove herself in a setting that would demand every ounce of her strength and intelligence. She prepared herself mentally, knowing that this role would be unlike anything she had done before. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would eventually bring her back to face her past, this time as someone who had defied all odds. In her new role, Sarah quickly realized that the stakes were higher than she'd anticipated. She was expected to lead complex projects, interact with influential clients, and inspire a team of seasoned professionals. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, Sarah found herself invigorated. This was her chance to prove, not just to others, but to herself, that she was more than her hardships. Each day, she grew more confident, her dedication evident in the quality of her work. Sarah's new job brought with it an intense learning curve, but she embraced it wholeheartedly. Each day was a test of her skills and her resilience, and she approached every challenge with the same unbreakable determination that had carried her through college. She was no longer the girl struggling to find her place in the world. She was becoming a force within her industry. Her colleagues noticed her dedication, and even her toughest clients couldn't deny the strength of her work ethic. Late nights became routine as Sarah poured herself into her projects. She learned to navigate corporate politics, to assert her opinions, and to stand her ground in meetings where others doubted her ideas. She encountered people who questioned her ability, often due to her background, but she met each doubter with quiet confidence. Her success began to speak for itself, silencing those who had doubted her and gradually earning her respect within the company. With each success, Sarah's self-assurance grew. She was building a life on her own terms, one that no one could take from her. She knew she had a long way to go, but for the first time, she felt that she was on the right path. She carried the quiet satisfaction of knowing that her hard work was paying off and that, despite every obstacle, she was succeeding in a world that had once seemed out of reach. One evening, after an especially challenging day, Sarah stayed late at the office, determined to finish a crucial project. As she was about to leave, she was approached by Evelyn, a senior executive known for her business acumen and formidable reputation. Evelyn had been observing Sarah's dedication and saw in her a potential she rarely encountered. "You remind me of myself when I was younger," Evelyn said, her voice calm but commanding. From that moment, Evelyn became more than just a superior, she became Sarah's mentor. Under Evelyn's guidance, Sarah learned to navigate the intricacies of corporate life with a finesse that only experience could teach. Evelyn shared stories of her own struggles, giving Sarah insight into the challenges she might face and how to overcome them. Sarah admired Evelyn's strength and resilience and absorbed every lesson, understanding that this mentorship was a gift. She began to see the future not as a distant goal but as something she could shape through her actions. Evelyn's mentorship transformed Sarah. With newfound skills and insights, she began to lead her projects with a confidence that surprised even her. She stopped second-guessing herself and started to trust her instincts, knowing that she was equipped with the knowledge and resilience to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Evelyn's guidance had given her the tools she needed, but it was Sarah's own strength that would ultimately carry her forward. In the corporate world, Sarah encountered obstacles she hadn't anticipated. Despite her growing reputation, she found herself facing biases and assumptions based on her background and gender. She overheard whispers and dismissive comments, reminders that, for some, she would never truly belong. Yet, instead of feeling discouraged, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had faced worse, and she was determined to prove that she was here to stay. As she continued to climb the ranks, she encountered colleagues who questioned her competence. Some tried to undermine her success, dismissing her accomplishments as luck or downplaying her achievements. But Sarah met these challenges head-on, with a quiet resilience that left her detractors speechless. She refused to let their prejudices hold her back and focused on proving her worth through her work. Through her perseverance, Sarah began to change minds. Even those who had doubted her were forced to acknowledge her capabilities. She had earned her place not because of anyone's approval but because she had fought for it. Her success was her own, a testament to her journey from a struggling student to a respected professional. As the months turned into years, Sarah's hard work and dedication propelled her into leadership roles that many thought were beyond her reach. She became known as someone who could turn around failing projects and handle high-stakes negotiations with calm determination. With every success, her reputation grew, and people who had once dismissed her began to take notice. Her resilience and strategic mind made her an invaluable asset to the company, and soon, her name was mentioned in boardrooms and executive meetings. Despite her accomplishments, Sarah never allowed success to cloud her purpose. She kept the humility she had learned from her struggles and remained focused on the values that had carried her this far. She continued to mentor junior employees, offering them guidance and encouragement. Her empathy and understanding of hardship resonated with many, particularly those from similar backgrounds. Her influence was no longer limited to her projects, it was shaping the very culture of the company, inspiring others to believe in their potential. Her ascent in the company was swift, yet it was not without sacrifices. Long hours, late nights, and personal sacrifices became the norm, but Sarah accepted them as the price of achieving something meaningful. Her journey was far from over, but she had come further than she ever dreamed. She was proving to herself, and to anyone who had ever doubted her, that success was possible even for those who began with nothing. And in the back of her mind, she remembered Charles, wondering if he would ever come to see just how wrong he had been. In the midst of her professional ascent, Sarah was faced with a personal challenge that tested her resilience in a way that her career never had. Her mother, the woman who had been her source of strength and inspiration, fell gravely ill. The diagnosis was unexpected, and the prognosis uncertain. Sarah found herself torn between her responsibilities at work and the overwhelming need to be there for her mother, who had sacrificed so much for her. The long hospital visits and sleepless nights reminded her of what truly mattered in life, grounding her in the values that had always guided her. The weight of her mother's illness forced Sarah to confront her vulnerabilities. She had always been strong, but now, the weight of grief and fear was nearly paralyzing. Work provided a temporary escape, but the reality of her mother's health hung over her like a cloud. Her colleagues noticed her exhaustion, and her mentor Evelyn, recognizing Sarah's struggle, encouraged her to take time to care for her family. "Success will always be here," Evelyn reminded her, "but you only get one mother." Those words resonated deeply, and Sarah took a brief leave of absence to focus on her family. Those days with her mother became some of the most precious in Sarah's life. They shared stories, laughed, and cried together, drawing strength from each other. Her mother, always proud and supportive, encouraged Sarah to keep pursuing her dreams, reminding her of the purpose she had worked so hard to achieve. Although her mother's illness left an emptiness in Sarah's heart, it also rekindled her determination to honor her family's sacrifices. She returned to work with renewed clarity, driven not just by ambition but by a deep sense of purpose and gratitude. Inspired by her mother's legacy and the resilience she had inherited from her, Sarah decided to take a bold step. She wanted to create something of her own, a business that reflected her values and could give back to those who, like her, had started with nothing. She founded a consulting firm focused on mentoring and supporting young entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds. Her vision was clear: to help others navigate the hurdles she had faced and empower them to build their own futures. Launching her own business brought new challenges, but Sarah faced them with the same determination that had carried her through every hardship. The work was demanding, but it filled her with a sense of fulfillment she hadn't felt before. She was not only building a business, she was building a legacy. Her firm quickly gained recognition for its innovative approach, and soon, clients from across industries sought her expertise. Sarah was no longer just a corporate leader, she was a trailblazer, creating opportunities for others. As her business grew, so did her influence. She began speaking at conferences, sharing her story and inspiring others to believe in themselves. Her journey from poverty to success resonated with many, and she became a symbol of resilience and possibility. She found herself in a position to impact lives on a larger scale, and she embraced the responsibility with humility and gratitude. Her life had come full circle, and she felt a quiet pride in knowing that she was making a difference. One morning, an invitation arrived that caught Sarah by surprise. It was a formal invitation to a high-profile business gala, hosted by none other than Charles's company. Her immediate reaction was hesitation. She hadn't thought about him in years, though memories of their last encounter at the reunion still lingered. But as she held the invitation, she realized that attending this event could be a chance to close that chapter once and for all, to confront her past as a person transformed. After some thought, Sarah decided to attend. She prepared meticulously, choosing an elegant dress that exuded confidence and professionalism. As she looked at her reflection before leaving, she saw a woman who had overcome more than anyone could have imagined, a woman who had defined her worth on her own terms. She wasn't attending to prove anything to Charles or to settle old scores. She was attending to honor her own journey, to walk into that room as the person she had become. As she stepped into the grand ballroom, heads turned. People recognized her from her recent success, but few connected her with the shy, quiet girl from years ago. She mingled with ease, her presence commanding respect without demanding it. This was a different kind of reunion, one that marked her transformation. For the first time, Sarah felt at peace with her past, ready to face anything the night would bring. The days leading up to the gala were filled with anticipation and reflection. Sarah's mind was a whirlwind of memories, both good and bad, but each one reminded her of the journey she had traveled. She spent long hours reviewing her achievements, recalling every struggle she had overcome. It wasn't pride that filled her, but a deep sense of fulfillment. She had come from humble beginnings and faced countless obstacles, yet she had succeeded in creating a life she could be proud of. On the night of the gala, Sarah took her time preparing, carefully choosing her attire and perfecting every detail. Her confidence shone through her movements as she prepared to face the room full of powerful people. She was no longer intimidated by wealth or status. She had built something far more valuable, a legacy built on resilience and integrity. As she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman who had risen above her circumstances, a woman who had become her own hero. As she entered the ballroom that night, she walked with a quiet pride, feeling every eye on her. Charles's company had spared no expense, and the atmosphere was both luxurious and intimidating. Yet, Sarah felt completely at ease. She was no longer the girl looking in from the outside. She was now part of the world she had once only dreamed of. And as she scanned the room, she saw familiar faces, including the one she had hoped would be there. As Sarah moved through the room, she noticed the curious glances and whispers that followed her. Dressed in a gown that radiated elegance, she exuded an aura of calm confidence that drew people in. She could sense the intrigue around her, as people who recognized her reputation from recent business achievements speculated about her presence. In the crowd, she spotted Charles, who was staring at her with a mix of surprise and something else, perhaps discomfort. The tables had turned, and she could feel it in the way he looked at her. Charles approached her, seemingly unsure of himself, a stark contrast to the confident man she remembered from their last encounter. He extended a hand, smiling stiffly. "Sarah, it's been a long time," he said, trying to mask his surprise. His voice lacked the casual arrogance she remembered, and there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. She shook his hand firmly, offering him a polite but restrained smile. For the first time, she saw him struggle for words. "You look different," he stammered, his gaze flicking over her as if trying to reconcile the woman before him with the girl he had mocked. Sarah let the silence linger for a moment before replying, "I've grown, Charles. In ways you may not understand." Her words were soft but carried an edge that was impossible to miss. She felt a wave of satisfaction as she saw him falter, his previous confidence nowhere to be seen. This was her night, and she intended to savor every moment of it. As the evening progressed, Charles's discomfort became more apparent. The people around them noticed her confidence, her ease in navigating the room, and they began gravitating toward her. Sarah could see the unease in Charles's eyes as he watched her effortlessly command the attention and respect of those he considered his peers. His initial confidence had withered, replaced by a realization that the woman before him was someone he no longer understood or controlled. It became clear that Charles was trying to reclaim his dominance, attempting to steer conversations back to himself. But with each passing moment, his attempts became more desperate, more obvious. Sarah observed him with a mixture of pity and amusement. She had spent years building herself into someone who didn't need his approval, and now, standing beside him, she saw that the roles had reversed. She was no longer the one left feeling inadequate, it was Charles who looked out of place. In the midst of a conversation, Charles leaned in, trying to salvage his pride. "So, Sarah, what have you been up to?" he asked, feigning interest. Sarah took a sip of her drink, allowing a slight smile to form before replying, "Building a business, creating opportunities, giving back to the community." The usual. Her casual tone contrasted sharply with the gravity of her achievements, and she could see Charles's forced smile waver. He had underestimated her, and now, he was beginning to realize just how wrong he had been. After a few hours, Sarah found herself alone with Charles in a quiet corner of the ballroom. She could sense that he had been maneuvering for this moment, perhaps hoping to regain some semblance of control. He straightened his posture and gave her a look that was supposed to be charming, though it only served to remind her of his arrogance. "Sarah," he began, "it's impressive to see how far you've come. But surely you understand, some of us were just destined for success." Sarah raised an eyebrow, not entirely surprised by his audacity. She met his gaze without flinching, her voice steady. "Success isn't a matter of destiny, Charles. It's about resilience, hard work, and a refusal to let others define your worth." Her words were calm, but they held a quiet power that silenced him. For a moment, she saw a flash of insecurity in his eyes, a sign that her words had struck a nerve. As the silence stretched between them, Charles shifted uncomfortably. "Well," he replied, his voice tinged with defensiveness, "not everyone can make it. Sometimes, people just don't have what it takes." Sarah felt a pang of the old hurt but dismissed it quickly. She realized, with a newfound sense of clarity, that his arrogance was merely a facade, a shield to hide his own insecurities. With a final, composed nod, she walked away, leaving Charles standing alone, a man out of his depth in a world he thought he controlled. As the evening wore on, Sarah was approached by one of the event's organizers, who asked if she would say a few words to the guests. She hesitated at first, feeling the weight of the moment, but then realized this was her opportunity to share her story on her own terms. She made her way to the stage, the quiet confidence she developed over the years steadying her as she faced the crowd. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice calm but resonant. "I'm honored to be here tonight. For those who don't know me, my journey to this moment wasn't easy. I come from humble beginnings, from a family that worked tirelessly to make ends meet. I spent years working multiple jobs to put myself through school, often feeling like the world was set against me." She paused, scanning the room and meeting the eyes of several guests. In the back, she saw Charles standing still, his face impassive, but his eyes focused intently on her. "But through those hardships," she continued, "I learned something invaluable. Success is not defined by where you come from or how many times you're told no, it's defined by resilience, by the courage to keep going when you're told you're not good enough. I stand here today not because I was handed an easy path, but because I refused to give up even when others expected me to fail." Her words hung in the air, and she could sense the audience absorbing the weight of her story. It was her victory, her way of finally shedding the shadows of her past. As Sarah finished her speech, the room erupted in applause. She could feel the support and admiration from the audience, a validation that was both humbling and empowering. Charles, however, stood in the back of the room, his expression a mixture of disbelief and discomfort. Her words had struck at his own insecurities, reminding him that his life had been a series of opportunities he had taken for granted. For years, he had viewed success as something he deserved by right, never imagining that true strength came from overcoming adversity. For Charles, watching Sarah on stage was a stark revelation. He felt small, as if everything he had prided himself on was hollow in comparison to what she had achieved. He tried to hide his discomfort, forcing a polite smile, but the applause around him only deepened his sense of inadequacy. He realized that he had underestimated her, perhaps even feared her strength, but he hadn't understood it until now. Sarah's success was her own, not because it was handed to her, but because she had earned it. As the applause faded, Charles felt exposed. He saw Sarah descend from the stage, surrounded by guests eager to congratulate her. She radiated confidence, grace, and authenticity, qualities that he now recognized he had never truly possessed. He wanted to approach her, to offer some sort of apology or acknowledgement, but he felt unworthy, his arrogance laid bare before her silent triumph. Just when the evening seemed to be winding down, Sarah was approached by a small group of business executives who had been captivated by her story. They represented a prominent investment firm with an interest in her new company, and they wanted to discuss a partnership. The offer was unexpected, yet exhilarating. Her mind raced with possibilities as they shared their vision and admiration for her mission of helping underprivileged youth find their way in the corporate world. As she listened, Sarah realized that this partnership could open doors she hadn't thought possible. With their support, she could expand her reach, create more programs, and help hundreds, maybe thousands, of young people who needed guidance, just as she once had. It was a defining moment, and she couldn't help but smile, knowing that this opportunity was a direct result of her own determination and resilience. From across the room, Charles watched the interaction with a sinking feeling. He had once dismissed her, mocked her, and now here she was, surrounded by influential people who saw her as an equal, if not a superior. He could feel his pride wavering as he witnessed her success. She was no longer the girl he had looked down upon, but a woman who had built a life and reputation that eclipsed his own. For the first time, he felt something he rarely experienced: regret. In a final attempt to salvage his pride, Charles approached Sarah after she finished speaking with the executives. "Sarah," he began, trying to sound casual, though his tone betrayed a hint of desperation. "It's remarkable what you've accomplished. I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but perhaps we could work together. Maybe there's room for collaboration between our companies." Sarah looked at him, her gaze steady but guarded. She could see the unease in his expression, the way he tried to mask his insecurity with his polished charm. But she didn't feel the same resentment she once did. In fact, she felt a quiet satisfaction, not in his discomfort, but in the realization that she no longer needed his approval. She had built something for herself, something that didn't rely on his validation. "Thank you, Charles," she replied, her voice calm and measured. "But I'm quite happy with the direction my company is heading. I've surrounded myself with people who believe in my mission and share my values. I'm grateful for the offer, but I think we're on different paths." Her words were polite, yet firm, a clear indication that she was no longer the girl he could belittle or dismiss. With a nod, she walked away, leaving him to absorb the impact of her quiet rejection. As the night continued, Sarah found herself at the center of attention. Guests and fellow executives approached her, each wanting to share their admiration or discuss potential partnerships. She received words of encouragement from colleagues who had heard of her journey and recognized her resilience. Her story resonated with people from all walks of life, and she felt a warmth in their support that she hadn't expected. Charles watched from a distance, his previous confidence now replaced with uncertainty. He was used to being the one people gravitated toward, but tonight it was Sarah who commanded the room. He tried to join conversations here and there, but people were captivated by her, drawn to her authenticity and strength. The crowd's attention was no longer his to claim, and he began to realize that this wasn't just her victory, but a testament to the impact she had on others. Seeing the support Sarah received, Charles felt a pang of envy. But mixed with that envy was a newfound respect for her. She had transformed from the girl he once underestimated into a woman who inspired those around her. For the first time, he saw her not as a competitor, but as a person who had overcome adversity to create something meaningful. It was a humbling realization, and he knew that he had much to learn from her strength and resilience. Sarah's partnership with the investment firm blossomed into something beyond her expectations. With their backing, she expanded her consulting firm, adding new programs and resources to help young entrepreneurs and underprivileged youth. Her influence spread across industries, and soon, she was invited to speak at conferences and events where her insights on resilience and leadership were sought after by some of the most powerful names in business. Her success didn't just elevate her own company, it shifted the landscape of her industry. She had built a reputation as a leader who cared deeply about making a difference, and her clients and partners valued her integrity as much as her business acumen. Her influence grew, and she found herself in a position to advocate for causes she cared about, championing diversity and equal opportunity in a way that made a tangible impact. For Charles, watching Sarah's rise was a difficult pill to swallow. He had always seen himself as untouchable, a leader in his field. But as he witnessed her success, he realized that he had overlooked what truly mattered in business: authenticity, empathy, and resilience. He felt a sense of loss, not just for what he had failed to achieve, but for the opportunities he had missed by clinging to his arrogance. One evening, unable to ignore the weight of his past actions, Charles decided to approach Sarah with a sense of humility he hadn't felt before. He found her after a conference, standing alone on a balcony overlooking the city. He cleared his throat, feeling a rare sense of vulnerability as he spoke. "Sarah, I wanted to apologize for everything. I was wrong about you, and I see that now. I'm sorry for how I treated you." Sarah turned to him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. For a moment, they stood in silence, the tension of years of resentment dissolving between them. She saw the regret in his eyes, and for the first time, she believed that his apology was genuine. While a part of her still felt the sting of their past, she knew that forgiveness would bring her more peace than holding on to bitterness. "Thank you, Charles," she replied softly. "I accept your apology. And I hope, for your sake, that you find the strength to build something real, something that matters." Her words were kind but firm, a reminder that her forgiveness didn't erase his actions but offered him a chance to grow. She turned back to the cityscape, feeling a sense of closure she hadn't expected. The past was behind her, and she was ready to move forward. Despite everything, Sarah couldn't ignore the humanity in Charles's apology. She had seen his flaws, but she also saw his potential to change. She realized that, in many ways, he was as trapped by his own past as she had once been. Over the following months, she reached out to him, offering occasional advice and encouragement. It wasn't friendship, but it was a form of compassion that allowed her to move beyond resentment. Her gesture surprised Charles, who had expected her to dismiss him entirely. Her kindness humbled him, and he found himself reevaluating his own approach to business and relationships. Inspired by her example, he began to make small changes in his own company, focusing on integrity and respect rather than dominance. Sarah's influence extended beyond her own success, reaching into the lives of those who had once looked down on her. Their connection remained distant, but it was rooted in mutual respect. Sarah understood that true success was not about holding grudges or proving others wrong. It was about building something meaningful and inspiring others to do the same. In showing compassion to Charles, she not only found closure for herself but demonstrated the strength of character that had carried her through every challenge. As her consulting firm continued to grow, Sarah received an offer from another company, one that proposed a merger to create a larger organization focused on social impact. The offer was tempting, but it would require a level of collaboration and compromise that she hadn't previously considered. She took time to reflect, weighing the potential for growth against her own vision and values. Ultimately, Sarah agreed to the partnership, but with conditions that ensured her company's mission remained at the forefront. The merger allowed her to expand her reach and resources while preserving the integrity she had worked so hard to build. It was a testament to her strength and vision, a decision rooted in both strategy and compassion. The partnership became a powerful force in the industry, amplifying her impact and helping countless individuals find their way. Sarah's journey had come full circle, and she had built something far greater than personal success. She had created a legacy that embodied her resilience, her empathy, and her unwavering belief in the power of transformation. To celebrate the success of her newly expanded company, Sarah organized a gala, not for herself, but to honor the people who had inspired and supported her along the way. The event was held in a beautiful venue, decorated with understated elegance. Unlike the grandiose displays of wealth she had once envied, Sarah's gala reflected her journey, genuine, meaningful, and warm. The guest list included industry leaders, former mentors, close friends, and some of the very people her programs had helped, all gathered to celebrate a mission that had grown beyond her own dreams. Throughout the night, she moved through the crowd, exchanging stories and laughter, listening to words of gratitude from those whose lives she had impacted. It was a humbling experience, and she felt a deep sense of fulfillment in knowing that her work was helping others find the strength to overcome their own challenges. Among the guests were several former classmates, people who had once overlooked or underestimated her, now seeing her as an inspiration. The most poignant moment of the evening came when Sarah took the stage to share a few words. She spoke about resilience, the importance of compassion, and the strength she had found in her own struggles. Her voice carried across the room, steady and filled with warmth. As she finished, the applause was thunderous. She looked out at the faces of her friends, mentors, and colleagues, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. This was her victory, a moment she had created not for recognition, but to inspire others to dream beyond their circumstances. In the crowd, Sarah noticed a familiar face, Lily, one of her few close friends from high school who had always been kind and supportive. Seeing her brought back a rush of memories, and Sarah felt a warmth that reminded her of simpler times. The two hadn't seen each other in years, but the connection between them felt as strong as ever. They hugged, laughing and reminiscing about their high school days, sharing stories of where life had taken them. Lily had followed a different path, working as a social worker, helping children from disadvantaged backgrounds. She expressed her pride in Sarah's journey, her voice filled with genuine admiration. "You always had something special," Lily said, her eyes shining. "I'm so proud of you, Sarah. You've done something extraordinary." Sarah felt a lump in her throat, moved by her friend's words. She realized that, despite the challenges, she had people in her life who had always believed in her. Throughout the night, other familiar faces came forward to reconnect, each conversation reminding her of the person she once was and the person she had become. For the first time, she felt that her past no longer held power over her. She was surrounded by people who saw her not as she had been, but as the woman she was now. It was a kind of acceptance she hadn't realized she needed, a validation that she had transcended her own limitations and earned her place in the world. As the night wound down, Sarah took a moment for herself, standing by a large window overlooking the city skyline. She watched the lights flicker in the distance, feeling a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. Her mind drifted back to the girl she had once been, the girl who had struggled to find her place in a world that seemed determined to hold her back. She thought of the countless hours spent studying, the nights working double shifts, and the sacrifices she had made to reach this moment. In that quiet moment, Sarah allowed herself to feel pride in everything she had achieved. It wasn't pride born of arrogance or validation from others, it was a quiet acknowledgement of her own strength. She had overcome more than she once thought possible, and she had done it on her own terms. Her success was not a response to those who had doubted her, but a celebration of her own resilience and dedication. For the first time, Sarah truly felt free. Free from the judgments, free from the expectations, and free from the past that had once weighed so heavily on her. She was proud of the woman she had become, a woman who had built her life with courage, compassion, and an unwavering belief in the power of perseverance. It was a moment of quiet triumph, a reminder that she was capable of anything she set her heart and mind to. With her company thriving and her influence growing, Sarah began to think beyond her immediate success. She wanted to create a lasting legacy, something that would continue to impact lives long after she was gone. Drawing inspiration from her own journey, she started planning new initiatives to support underprivileged youth, not just in business but in various fields where they could find their own paths. She envisioned scholarship programs, mentorship networks, and even community centers where young people could find guidance and support. Her vision extended beyond her own company. She reached out to other leaders and organizations, encouraging them to join her in creating a broader movement for change. She understood that real impact required collaboration, and she was eager to bring together people from diverse backgrounds who shared her commitment to making a difference. Her legacy would not be one of wealth or personal accolades but of empowerment and transformation, a foundation upon which future generations could build. The planning brought Sarah a new sense of purpose. She had achieved personal success, but now her mission was to create opportunities for others to find their own strength and resilience. Her life had come full circle, and she was ready to give back in ways that mattered deeply to her. She poured her heart into these plans, finding joy in knowing that her work would continue to inspire and uplift others, just as she had once dreamed. Charles's journey had also been altered by Sarah's influence. Witnessing her transformation had forced him to confront his own shortcomings, and he began to make changes in his own life. He reached out to old friends and mentors, seeking guidance and admitting his faults. He took steps to shift his company's culture, promoting values of integrity and respect that he had once dismissed as secondary. Inspired by Sarah's example, he began a slow but genuine transformation, determined to leave behind the arrogance that had once defined him. It was not an easy path for Charles. He struggled with the realization that his previous success had been built on entitlement rather than merit, and he faced resistance from those who still saw him as the man he had been. But he persisted, determined to rebuild himself with authenticity. He even reached out to Sarah occasionally, sharing updates on his progress and seeking her advice. To his surprise, she responded with encouragement, offering insights that helped him stay focused on his journey of self-improvement. Through her influence, Charles became a better leader and a better person. He learned to value the people around him, to listen, and to lead with empathy. His company began to reflect the changes in him, attracting people who were committed to making a difference. It was a slow process, but he found satisfaction in the transformation, recognizing that Sarah's example had given him a second chance to create something meaningful. Years passed, and Sarah's life continued to evolve. Her legacy grew, reaching people across the globe, each initiative a testament to the resilience and compassion that had defined her journey. Her company flourished, but it was her impact on the lives of those she had helped that brought her the most fulfillment. She remained actively involved in her projects, mentoring young leaders and championing causes that were close to her heart. Her work was no longer about proving herself, it was about leaving behind a world that was a little kinder, a little more hopeful. Sarah often thought of her mother, her first source of strength, and the values she had inherited from her. She carried her mother's memory with her, a reminder of the sacrifices and love that had shaped her journey. She also thought of Evelyn, her mentor, whose wisdom had guided her when she needed it most. Their legacy lived on in her work, an unbroken chain of resilience that continued to inspire others. As she looked to the future, Sarah felt a sense of peace and purpose. She had built a life filled with meaning, a life that honored the struggles and triumphs that had brought her here. Her story had begun with hardship and doubt, but it had blossomed into a journey of hope, resilience, and transformation. And as she stood on the precipice of her next chapter, she knew that her legacy would endure, lighting the way for others to follow their own paths of courage and compassion. Her story was no longer just her own, it had become a beacon of possibility for all who dared to dream beyond their circumstances.